Hi everybody. Have you ever wondered how our immune system works and what does memory of the immune system actually mean? My name is Sinu and you can call me Sin, although spelt with an X, not an S. I'm a PhD neuroscience student here at the University of Oxford and I'm also a doctor training to be a neurologist. Check out my intro video for more information about this channel. Now I usually talk about all things brain science related, but today I'm going to talk about a different type of memory. I'm going to give a brief introduction to how the immune system works and also talk about how the immune system remembers. Now I'll preface this by saying that I am by no means an immunologist, but I've been asked to explain plainly how the immune system works quite a lot recently, so I thought I'd give it a go here on this channel. And as you can imagine, it's also highly relevant to our current pandemic and the introduction of all these different vaccines. This also comes off listening to a really nice talk by Dr. Danielle Wellington, a member of the Wellcome Centre for Integrated Neuroimaging here at Oxford University, who gave us this really nice talk on the immune system. My top 3 takeaways for this talk would be, firstly, we should remember that the immune system is for more than just fighting off infection, although that's obviously a big one. Secondly, when it comes to fighting off infections, the immune system has 2 broad responses, a non-specific and a specific response. I'll describe this further in a moment. And thirdly, antibodies are important components of the immune response, but it's just one part of the entire puzzle. Okay, let's start off with what are the functions of the immune system? Everybody knows that one of the main purposes of the immune system is to fight off infection. So that's a big one. So let's put that at number 1 and call it defense. The immune system works to mount this immune response and protect us from pathogens such as bacteria, viruses, parasites, and more. I'll spend most of this talk discussing this role, but before I get to that, I want to briefly mention 2 more important functions of the immune system. The immune system is used for surveillance and removal of old, dead, and damaged cells. So every day, there's a large amount of turnover of our cells. For example, new hair and skin cells form, and the old ones get replaced. Now this is the same for most cell types in the body. Well, the immune system is involved in removing these old, dead, or damaged cells. Now the third function of the immune system that I like to mention is called autotolerance. This term simply refers to the fact that the immune system must be able to recognize our own cells and not attack the body's own tissues and organs. It's obvious, but it's also really important. These are 3 broad functions of the immune system, and things can actually go wrong with each of the roles. For example, if the defense part of the immune system is too weak, it won't be able to mount an adequate immune response to pathogens, and it'll be unable to fight off infections. This is why immunosuppressed people are at higher risk of having recurrent and more severe infections. Secondly, if the immune system doesn't remove damaged cells, some of these may actually mutate and form cancer cells. In fact, sometimes cancer cells develop the ability to avoid detection by the immune system, and that's what makes them so dangerous. And lastly, if the immune system loses its autotolerance, it may start attacking normal tissue of the body, and this results in autoimmune disorders such as type 1 diabetes and multiple sclerosis. So each of the roles are important, really. Okay, so let's focus on this defense part of the immune system. An important concept is that there are 2 arms or parts of the immune system. You can think of this as 2 teams which carry out the work to fight off an infection. Now these 2 components of the immune system leads to different but complementary immune responses to fighting off an infection. The first component is called the innate immune response, and the second is called the adaptive immune response. You can think of the innate immune response as this general army of the immune system. This component is always present and constantly scanning for pathogens, but it isn't very specific. This means that the innate immune response will attack any foreign pathogens it recognizes, but it may not have the specific tools to get rid of the infection completely. Instead, the main aim of the innate immune response is to keep the infection levels low and slow down the infection so that the adaptive immune response has time to develop and act. By contrast, the adaptive immune response can be considered the specialist team of the immune system. It has specific tools to combat pathogens, so it's generally much more lethal and can completely remove an infection from the body. However, it does take time for the adaptive immune response to develop. And in fact, in order to achieve a successful adaptive immune response, Firstly, parts of the innate immune response, so that general response, must take the signature of the pathogen to areas of the body called lymph nodes, so that these specialist immune cells can form and go off and combat the specific pathogen. And this usually takes about 4 to 5 days. So, despite the adaptive immune response being generally more lethal, both responses are important to fighting infection. Okay, so let's have a closer look at the timeline of a typical immune response, as that's really informative for how the immune system works. Consider a situation where your immune system meets a common cold virus for the first time. This graph shows time in days at the bottom and relative activity on the left side. The green area represents when your innate immune response is mostly active, so that general part of your immune response. The blue area is when your adaptive immune response is active, so that specific, specialist response. When you get infected by a virus, it will enter cells of your body and start to replicate and cause trouble. The activity level of the virus slowly starts to increase. During the initial few days, the innate immune response is trying to slow down the virus activity, but it isn't enough to remove the virus. Now, without the innate immune response, the virus will just replicate even quicker and cause more damage. This is the period when you generally start to feel ill and run down with the infection. However, the innate immune response is also recording information about the virus and bringing it to lymph nodes to activate the adaptive immune response. This specialist immune response is ready by about day 5 to act and combat the infection directly. So then the activity levels of the virus start to get less and less until the infection is cleared. If we consider the activity of the adaptive immune response cells, this activity will start to build up from about day 5 and peaks a few days after it's removed the virus before reducing back down. Importantly, however, the cells of the adaptive immune response don't go away fully like the virus. Instead, some of these cells will continue to circulate around the body in case that virus comes back again. This way, the next time the virus comes, there are already specific specialized immune cells that can combat the virus more effectively and quicker. This is why they say you may develop an immunity against a virus after you've been infected once. The classic example is chickenpox. The first time you get chickenpox, you have this bad infection and you feel really ill. But generally, you get better, and you get better by yourself. Once you've had chickenpox once, you often don't get it again. In reality, what's actually happening is that you still have bits of this adaptive immune response floating around the body, and the next time you get the infection, you'll actually clear the virus before you're even aware of being sick. So, you can therefore think of this remaining activity of the adaptive immune response as the memory of the immune system. It's essentially this lingering immunity of a specific infection that you've had in the past. That's pretty amazing, isn't it? Now, our immune system can develop this memory for almost all viruses and bacteria that it encounters. However, just like memories of our life, this memory may not last forever. And that's one reason why people tend to get yearly flu vaccinations. That's in order to update and refresh the memory of the immune system to certain infections. Now, for COVID-19, we're still working out how long the immune system memory lasts after someone has an infection. And of course, the vaccines are aimed at providing the immune system this signature of the virus to create this adaptive immune response to fight the virus effectively in case we get infected. To be more specific, you may have heard that vaccines aim to introduce the viral spike protein into the body. This spike protein is a harmless part of the virus, but represents that signature that the innate immune response can then take to the lymph nodes so that the adaptive immune response can develop specific tools to combat. Okay, so now that we know about the timeline of a general immune response and the lasting memory that forms, I want to touch upon two main players of this specialist adaptive immune response because you would have heard about them in the news. These two players are firstly CD8 T cells and secondly antibodies. Now both are important parts of the adaptive immune response and work slightly differently. CD8 T cells are a type of immune cell called a lymphocytes, and they work mainly to kill cells which have been infected with the pathogen. They do so by sending little chemicals to infected cells that breaks down the integrity of the cell until they can't survive anymore. Now again, the way CD8 T cells recognize infected cells is by detecting that signature of the pathogen which it has learnt from that initial general immune response. That's why, both immune responses are important. Now, the second component of the adaptive immune response are antibodies. Antibodies are these Y-shaped proteins which can recognize specific pathogens, and that means you'll have different antibodies for different pathogens that you may encounter. Now, antibodies also work in a few different ways. One way is to neutralize a virus before they can infect a cell, and they do this by coating the virus so that it can't bind to potential host cells and enter it. In addition, antibodies can also attach to pathogens and act as flags for other parts of the immune system to come and eat that pathogen up and remove it from the body. Therefore, antibodies generally work synergistically with other parts of the immune system, and that's how they have maximal effect. Finally, in terms of it's my understanding that the vaccines will increase activity of both antibodies as well as CD8 T cells. And that's why vaccines should be effective in stopping the infection, both by clearing infected cells and by neutralizing the virus before it can infect cells. So there you have it, a brief primer on how the immune system works, including two main immune responses in fighting the infection. Also, that we have CD8 T cells and antibodies, which are major players of this specific specialized adaptive immune response. And these form a memory of the immune system. So I've hoped you've enjoyed hearing about something slightly different today, but I'm sure we'll get back to some more brain-centric stuff next time. As always, subscribe and like to learn more about brain science with me, and I shall see you at the next video. Thank you.